This is the Major Crimes Archive at Sussex Police. I'm surrounded by all the clues and evidence that helped police catch David Munley, a psychopath who killed an elderly woman and then fooled the outside world into thinking she was still alive. It was this note left for a milkman that finally led to his downfall. His victim was 87-year-old Jean Barnes. She lived on her own in Worthing in West Sussex.
Jean Barnes was educated at Cambridge. She was one of the first women to go to Cambridge, and she spoke 6 languages. However, in later life, she lived quite a reclusive lifestyle.
When she hadn't been seen for a couple of weeks, a concerned neighbour called police. When they got into the house, they made a grim discovery. She'd been murdered and covered up with a blanket, and her body had been lying there for around 2 weeks. At that stage, what did you have to actually go on?
Very little. Looking around the house, she'd obviously lived alone for some time. There were newspapers stacked up everywhere. But also, there were marks in the dust where objects must have been in the past, and now they were missing. It would appear that someone after the murder had stolen some property from the house.
Then new clues began to emerge, pointing to a sinister and determined attacker, someone who'd been preying on Jean Barnes for quite some time.
What we discovered in those early days of the investigation was that she had made contact with the police on a number of occasions, in particular in February, when she was putting out some milk bottles and she was attacked on her doorstep. She managed to fight them off and close the door and contacted the police. In the April, she received a phone call from somebody purporting to be from the bank. They started to ask her personal questions, name, date of birth, but during that conversation, Miss Barnes became suspicious, so she contacted the bank and the police.
Was this, in fact, her killer? Then a vital clue was discovered that was to change the course of the investigation. A note for the milkman left on Jean Barnes's doorstep. The note told the milkman to cancel further deliveries as she was going into a nursing home. That seemed plausible enough, but for one crucial fact. Detectives knew that Jean Barnes couldn't have written it. By the time it was left on her doorstep, she was already dead. The milkman's note was compared to samples of Jean Barnes's handwriting found in the house. The conclusion, it was written by somebody else. As police delved deeper, they uncovered more things that simply didn't make any sense. Jean's bills had been paid with a forged cheque. Someone had even taken in her post and newspapers. In fact, somebody had gone to extraordinary lengths to fool everyone into thinking that Jean Barnes was still alive and well. But why? Police needed a new lead. What sort of person could do this? They enlisted the help of a psychological profiler to try to get inside the mind of the killer.
I was in no doubt in my own mind that we were dealing with someone who was dangerously a psychopath. A psychopath is an individual that does not have conscience or guilt. They would have needed to have returned to the house and had the capacity to have walked past Miss Barnes and what they had done to her and still return to pick up her belongings. It, to most people, would be breathtakingly callous. To the psychopath, they wouldn't have any concern or compunction whatsoever. She's lived her life, I'm going to have those possessions, end of.
So, police knew they were looking for a psychopath. They even knew what his handwriting looked like, but they didn't know his name. So they turned to Crimewatch.
Going on Crimewatch was a long shot. We had the handwriting, which we knew did not belong to Miss Barnes, and we wanted to know who it did belong to.
Against all the odds, police did get the call they were hoping for. A woman in Worthing recognised the handwriting and named David Munley, an odd-job man who lived half a mile from Jean Barnes. The woman who called Crimewatch told how Munley had done work for her and her neighbour. He'd stolen a chequebook and forged signatures. It was all sounding rather familiar.
Munley was arrested. He insisted he was innocent, but when samples of his handwriting were analysed, they gave him away.
That handwriting matched exactly the writing on the notes to the milkman and the writing on the cheques.
Police then discovered what Munley had done with Jean Barnes's antiques. He'd been selling them to small shops like this one in Worthing. Over the months, the owner got to know him quite well.
How often had he been coming in and what had he said to you?
He'd been in on a regular basis. We used to chat about everything really, from the army through to where all the stuff was coming from, which was East Anglia. It was an aunt of his who'd passed away, and he was clearing the house out.
And you were never suspicious? I mean, what was he like?
He was a very amiable chap, very likeable, very laid back. I got on very well with him. It just goes to show you never know somebody that well. And to say that I was shocked was an understatement, a real understatement.
Sure enough, when police checked the antiques supplied by Munley, they'd been stolen from Jean Barnes.
Police now had the final piece of the jigsaw and were able to put together what actually happened.
We believe that David Munley was stealing from Miss Barnes in the run-up to her murder. She had noticed things going missing and improved her security.
But somehow, Munley had found a way in.
Who are you? What are you doing here? Get out of my house!
He beat her around the head 9 times, left her dead downstairs, covered her body with a blanket and continued to steal from the house.
The final piece of compelling evidence was found when they searched his house. This is police footage of the actual moment when they found Jean Barnes's identity card hidden under the stairs.
And there it is.
It was a conclusive link between Munley and his victim.
In police interviews, Munley denied everything.
Did you kill Jean Barnes?
No.
Are you certain?
Yes. Notes were left for a milkman following Jean's death. Did you write those notes?
No. Different people have given us different versions than you've given in the last couple of days. Why's that?
They're wood against mine. Simple as that.
I think you're lying.
That's your prerogative. I think they're lying.
Police charged Munley with the murder of Jean Barnes on the 4th of December 1999.
I did not murder Jean Barnes.
I would describe David Munley as all things that a psychopath is, devoid of conscience, totally focused on the end game as far as it suits him, without any concern in any regard for anybody along the way.
Miss Barnes was an 87-year-old woman. She'd led a wonderful life. Nobody had the right to take that life from her, and I'm very pleased we were able to capture David Munley and convict him for her murder.